Hey, what's up, guys? I want to do one more quick video on functions, and this one's kind of an advanced topic. It's called passing by reference. Some of you guys really wanted to know, I really talked you out of doing global variables because global variables are evil and the work of horrible forces. So how do you basically pass a variable into a function and sort of get more than one thing returned? Okay, because I think that's a lot of the reason that people want to use global variables is they're saying, well, I want this and this to change. How do I send that back to my main program? So we can do that with in C++ with something called a reference. And so you'll notice up here at the top that my reference, all of a sudden my function prototype looks a little bit weird. It has this, I say I want an integer, but I have an ampersand next to the integer. Okay, here I have an integer and I want the ampersand next to the integer. So what a reference lets me do, the best way that I think about it is that it sort of makes a tunnel. Okay, when we say reference, we're really saying I care about the sort of the memory address that this integer is located at, right? And we've talked a little bit about that an integer gets stored in a piece of memory in the computer. And so if I could actually, instead of saying, hey, here's the value that this integer holds, use that. If I could say, hey, I'm actually going to give you the address of where the value's stored, you could use that to do your calculations because that address holds the information that we care about. But if we made a change to that address, we'd actually be changing it in memory, and so no matter where that variable lived, it would end up changed. Okay, so again, this is a little bit tricky, something to wrap your head around. We're going to use this when we want to pass stuff to draw around. So it might be something that you kind of understand exactly what's going on at a later date. But what we are going to try to do is get you to get a behavior that you want, which is I actually want all three of these variables to get changed in my main function. So I made an integer that started at 2, at 3, and at z, and I really want it to be that all three of these end up modified at the end of the day. Okay? So I'm going to do this by passing x and y by reference into my function. So then when I manipulate those guys, I'm not manipulating them directly. I'm manipulating the memory that holds their information. Okay, so think about it. Like I'm sending a letter to your house, right? So you know the address of your house. I can send you a message, and you'll get that information. So how does this go? So I made this thing where I have a little ampersand saying I'm expecting, if you pass me a variable, I'm going to look at kind of where it came from and to get its value rather than itself. Okay, and then I call it just like normal. So the actual function call doesn't look any normal. Ref example takes in two values and returns a value, which is an integer. Okay, so I made an integer z, which is going to hold that answer. Okay, there we go. So now when I print this out, I'm going to see that the function returned this value, and then x and y have changed, even though you'll notice that I didn't do any math on x and y. All I did was call this function. So let's see what the function does. Down here, I'm taking the references in, okay? And just like every other function, I'm just labeling them something that they're going to be called when they come into the function, okay? So I'm going to have this variable a and this variable b. So whatever I put in the first spot, it's going to get renamed to a. And again, it's a reference, so it's going to be looking at whatever I pass in memory location and changing it. So here, I just said I'm going to add 42 here, and I'm going to multiply it by 7 here. So the reality is I'm going to spell variable, right? So this is going to add 42 to the variable a, okay? But this is going to change x. Why? Because we're looking at this place as memory location. So we've actually gone into the memory and manipulated the value there. So as soon as we leave this function, we actually changed x because we messed with the memory that was associated with this variable. And that's why this is a little bit tricky, and this is something you can really kind of just do in C++. Not just do in C++, but it's certainly one of the things people like about C++, because this is one of the ways that you get a lot of speed, right? All of a sudden, and efficiency, all of a sudden I didn't have to copy the values here, okay? I just sent a reference to the value so I can pull off the things that I want to do, okay? I didn't have to actually make a copy of memory. It doesn't seem like a big deal with a couple of integers, but let's say I had a list of, or an array of like 1,000 things, right? I can send in my reference to my array, manipulate the array in place. I didn't have to make a copy of it, and oh wait a second, I actually was able to change things in an array because I normally can't return them, right? So again, this is how we get some of that speed and efficiency for those of you guys that are kind of looking to it. So hey, look, I changed A, I changed B. This is kind of, when I call the function, I'm changing, this is matching up with this, so X is getting changed, B is getting changed here, and that's actually going to change Y. Then also, we can return a calculation. So instead of making a variable and returning, I'm just saying return A plus B. So whatever the values are, add them together and return them, and let's just see this thing work. Okay, so it started out as a 2, started out as a 3, the function returned 65, okay, X became 44, Y became 21. And that makes sense because 44 plus 21 is 65, but the cool thing is that we actually changed X and Y on our main program without doing anything, just by doing this reference example. This is something you got to be careful with because it can definitely cause some shenanigans in your program, and it's not something you want to do every time. But if you have a situation where maybe you want to change more than one value and send it back, that would be a good option. Sometimes you also see this in combination with the void. Instead of returning stuff, you just want to manipulate a couple of variables. You want to mutate them, and so you do a bunch of calculations. They get changed in the main. You pass it in by reference. Good example of this is, let's say you're making a little physics example and you have a bunch of points that are representing a vector or something like that, some movement, and you want to apply a calculation to all of them. You want it to be changed up in your main. There you go. Hey, pass them in by reference, do a little bit of math on them, and then they got changed where you wanted them changed. This turns into a void. Okay? Again, functions, we just want them to be replacing a bunch of code somewhere else that makes our code easier to read and gives us a little more control of, hey, look, I'm doing this specific thing right now. Okay, cool. Hope that's helpful. Cheers.